Hi. The bill had been sitting on the counter for 3 days. I'd noticed it the first night, unopened beneath a stack of mail that was mostly store flyers and pre-approvals we'd never asked for. I'd set it aside, then again the next day when it migrated under a takeout menu. By the third evening, I'd stopped expecting her to mention it. When I got home, she was already in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone. No dinner started. No glance up when I entered. I picked up the bill again and placed it on the island where she couldn't ignore it. "This one's overdue," I said quietly. "It wasn't supposed to be." She set her phone down with a sigh and gave me a look I knew too well, tired of me before I'd even finished the sentence. "I took care of it," she said. I opened the envelope and scanned the balance. It was much higher than last month's. I didn't ask why. There was no point. "From the joint account?" I asked instead. Her mouth twitched in annoyance. "Yes, from the joint." I nodded slowly. "We agreed we'd discuss large payments first." She folded her arms and leaned against the counter. "Oh my God, you are exhausting sometimes." That wasn't new. But lately, everything was edged with something colder. Less about the money and more about the act of making me small. I kept my tone steady. "This isn't about control. We made a plan." She turned away, picking up her phone again. "You're obsessed with plans. Maybe if you worried less about the money and more about—" She waved her hand vaguely. "Being someone worth staying with, this wouldn't be an issue." I felt the weight of that, but I didn't react. Not because it didn't sting, but because the sting had grown dull. This wasn't the first line like it. She looked up sharply. "You know what?" She straightened her shoulders and gave me a thin smile. "You're just lucky I haven't left you." There it was, a rehearsed line, said with deliberate detachment. No heat. No argument. Just a card she thought she could throw down to win the hand. I felt something click into place. Not a reaction, not anger. Just clarity. I let out a slow breath and smiled faintly. "Thank you for saying that." Her eyebrows drew together. "Don't twist my words," she said, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her tone now. I rinsed my coffee mug in the sink. "I'm not. You've made things very clear." She opened her mouth, then seemed to think better of it. The tension stayed in her shoulders, but she turned and left the room without another word. When the bedroom door closed behind her, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the unopened laptop in front of me. This wasn't sudden. The past year had been erosion, not explosion. Small humiliations in front of friends. "He's terrible with decisions," she'd say, laughing too brightly. "If I didn't manage things, we'd be living in a box." Dismissive comments when I brought up shared plans. "I'll do what I want, thanks." Weeks without so much as a conversation that wasn't transactional. And still, I'd held the line. Loyalty was a stubborn thing. But loyalty in the absence of respect is just captivity. Tonight was different, not because she'd crossed some new line, but because the mask had finally dropped. The bluff was out in the open. She thought I was trapped. That she could erode the foundation, brick by brick, while assuming I'd keep holding the house up alone. She was wrong. I stood and walked to the home office. In the locked drawer of my desk was a slim folder. Not dusty, updated often, quietly. Inside, prenuptial agreement, list of joint and personal assets, copies of personal account statements, notes from my attorney consult, 6 months ago now. I hadn't acted yet because some part of me had still hoped, or feared, or both. That ended tonight. I removed the folder and placed it on the desk. I didn't need to open it yet. The decision itself was the first action. Across the hall, I heard faint music through the bedroom door, her voice on the phone, low and amused. Not for me. I sat back in my chair. No confrontation would come. No final argument. That would give her a narrative to spin. This would be done on my terms, strategic, controlled, irreversible once set in motion. The hardest part was already over. I had let go. Later, I moved through the house, securing the front door, turning off lights. When I passed the bedroom, I paused. Her laughter drifted faintly through the door again. Another call, another audience. I didn't linger. In the living room, I sat alone, glass of water untouched beside me. "You're just lucky I haven't left you." "No. You're just lucky I stayed this long." I leaned forward and picked up my phone. The attorney's number was still in my contacts, under a plain alias. Tomorrow, the process would begin. Not reactive. Not emotional. Just done. I slept that night more deeply than I had in months. The kind of sleep that follows a decision. No dreams. No tossing. Just stillness. By morning, the mechanics of the day resumed. I made coffee, answered emails, prepared for meetings. She moved through the house as if nothing had happened, an unspoken dare, waiting to see if I would react to her line from the night before. I didn't. That was her mistake. Driving to the office, my mind replayed the past year with brutal clarity. It hadn't started with a single betrayal or blowout argument. Erosion is quieter than that. It begins with small dismissals, public comments delivered with a smile that doesn't reach the eyes. I could still hear them. He doesn't handle pressure well. If I want something done right, I do it myself. He's sweet, but not the most ambitious. Always in front of others. At dinners, at her friends' parties where I was the obligatory plus one, standing with a drink in my hand while she performed the role of the clever, long-suffering wife. At first, I told myself it was nerves, misplaced humor. I'd excused it privately, even tried to talk to her about it. Those conversations ended the same way every time, her rolling her eyes, accusing me of being sensitive or controlling. Then came the withholding. Small refusals masked as independence. No more shared planning. No more couples' decisions. She started managing her world separately. Weekends away with the girls. Travel plans that never included me. Finances handled unilaterally. Each step carved more distance between us. But I stayed. Out of loyalty, habit, and if I was honest, a fear of the upheaval divorce would bring. She knew that. Counted on it. The more she isolated herself, the more she believed I would simply remain, an inert, predictable fixture in the house. Until last night. At my desk, I pulled up my private email and drafted a short message to my attorney. Subject, ready to proceed. The reply came within an hour. Direct, measured. The template for a separation packet was attached, along with the checklist we'd reviewed in that quiet meeting 6 months earlier, the one where I'd said, "Not yet, but I want to be ready." Now I was ready. That afternoon, I reviewed our joint accounts. First step, stop all automatic transfers from my personal income to the joint account. I scheduled them to route to my protected account instead, one she didn't have access to. I documented everything. Balances, recent withdrawals, unusual spending patterns I hadn't questioned before. There were more than a few. Luxury items that had appeared with no conversation. High-end dinners I hadn't attended. A pattern, not a one-off. I didn't feel anger, just confirmation. The flashbacks came in waves that evening while she moved around the house, laughing on her phone, planning another girls' night. I wasn't invited to. I remembered the night 2 months ago when I'd overheard her on the phone with a friend. "I swear, sometimes I feel like I'm already single. He's so safe, predictable. But I'm not in a rush." I had sat in the darkened hallway, unseen, absorbing every word. That night should have been my tipping point, but I'd hesitated. Then another conversation, a week later, her voice low but animated. "There's this guy who just gets me. Totally different energy. It's nice to remember what that feels like." At the time, I'd clung to the idea that maybe it was venting. Maybe nothing had happened yet. But intent matters, and hers had been clear for a while. The pieces fit together now. She had been testing the boundaries, seeing how far she could push without consequence. The cruelest lines were always calculated, not impulsive. And the bluff she'd played last night, "You're just lucky I haven't left you," was another test. But she'd misread the room. The man she thought was trapped had already mapped his way out. I prepared methodically that night. Opened a new secure cloud folder and uploaded all critical documents. Printed 2 copies of the separation packet, one for her, one for my records. Flagged the date for filing the paperwork with the court. Every action was deliberate, calm. No room for impulse. The grieving had already happened, long before. In the silences between conversations, in the long drives alone after another public humiliation. There was no more grief left, only resolve. Later, when she came home from another late outing, she found me reading in the living room. She smiled absently, too preoccupied with her phone to notice anything in my expression. Another flurry of notifications buzzed through as she walked past. I watched her go. No words exchanged. No need. I was already gone inside. And soon, the rest would follow. I didn't hesitate the next morning. There was no question about whether or when to act. The decision had been made. Execution was all that remained. While she slept, I brewed coffee and opened my laptop. My inbox held the attorney's reply, a separation packet template, the checklist we'd reviewed 6 months ago, and a clear directive: proceed when ready. I typed my confirmation carefully. Proceed. Documents ready on my end. It was a formality now. The foundation was already laid. At the bank's portal, I rerouted my automatic transfers, income redirected to my protected personal account. Not the first time I'd rehearsed these steps, but this time, they were permanent. I downloaded statements, logged all balances, archived screenshots. The joint account was lighter than I'd expected, confirming what I'd quietly suspected. Her recent spending wasn't accidental. Not anger. Just data. Each piece reinforced the rightness of what I was doing. She drifted into the kitchen mid-morning, phone in hand, unreadable behind oversized sunglasses. "I'm going out later," she said. I didn't look up from my screen. "Of course." No confrontation. No visible shift in tone. She waited a beat, as if gauging for a reaction, then left. The absence of resistance unsettled her more than any argument would have. With the house to myself, I moved quickly. Confirmed the account reroutes. Cancelled unnecessary joint services, subscriptions she'd absorbed into her independent life. Prepared asset protection documents, and uploaded them to my secure folder. Each step closed another opening. Every action was silent, unemotional, controlled. Her patterns over the next few days only accelerated my resolve. The same public bravado, texts left visible, louder than necessary calls to friends. "He's so controlling. Can't handle a woman with her own life." All staged. She needed me to react, to validate the story she'd been weaving for months. I gave her nothing. I reviewed the prenup again. Ironclad. A choice we'd once made in good faith, one she seemed to have forgotten still bound us both. No, I wasn't trapped. The math of it all left little room for the version she was preparing to spin. By midweek, I printed the separation papers. 2 clean copies, one for her, one for my records. No dramatic note. No personal message. Just the facts, in legally sound language. Timing mattered. The delivery would be deliberate. Not during a fight. Not in anger. In calm, at a moment she wouldn't expect. That evening I finalized my checklist. Personal items secured. Paycheck rerouting verified. Digital records backed up. Every action had been rehearsed. Now it was done. From the office I heard her in the bedroom, laughing into her phone. Another call not meant for me. Another performance. She still thought the story was hers to write. That I was too passive to alter the ending. She was wrong. The gap between us widened fast. Over the next few days she doubled down on the patterns that had become routine. Late nights out. Carefree selfies with captions that barely concealed their intent. Loud phone calls staged for my benefit. I watched it all without comment. The version of me she'd been provoking no longer existed. One night I returned from a meeting to find her on the couch, wine glass in hand, laughing into her phone. The conversation shifted as I entered, her tone more performative. "I mean, I could leave any time. He'd be lost without me," she said. Then a pause. "But why give him that win?" The words weren't for her friend. They were for me. I moved past without a glance, hung my coat, and went upstairs. No reaction. No fuel for her story. The evidence was undeniable now. I began documenting more deliberately. Screenshots of certain texts, notes on overheard conversations, dates and times. It wasn't about revenge. It was about closing gaps, preparing for any attempt to rewrite what was about to unfold. 2 days later, I confirmed what I had suspected. She left her phone on the kitchen counter while showering. A message preview lit the screen. "Last night was amazing. When can I see you again?" I didn't need to see more. It wasn't about reading her private life. The intention was already clear. The emotional entanglement had crossed the threshold. Not yet physical? Perhaps. But the distinction didn't matter anymore. The trust was long gone. I updated the documentation, made a secure backup, informed my attorney. "Please note, intend to move forward with full filing. No reconciliation." The reply was immediate, supportive, ready. That evening, she returned from another night out, eyes bright with performative energy. "You should go out sometime," she said casually. "Might help you loosen up." I held her gaze, my tone even. "Thank you for the suggestion." She blinked, caught off guard by the flatness of my response. No irritation. No wounded tone. Just distance. She left the room soon after. The final decision was no longer abstract. There was no marriage to salvage. No version of this that could be patched or paused. Everything was prepared. The papers were ready. The timing was set. That night, after she left for another outing, I retrieved the folder from my desk. Printed, organized, signed where needed. The separation filing. The asset protection notice. The full packet, legally sound and irreversible once delivered. I placed them in an envelope, sealed it, then carried it to the bedroom. I set it on her pillow. No note. No personal message. Just the papers. As I moved through the darkened house, securing doors, I felt no triumph, no bitterness, only certainty. I was already gone inside. The rest would follow soon enough. She left around 8. Loud heels on hardwood, perfume trailing after her. I heard the front door shut, her laughter already on the phone as it clicked closed. Another night out. Another stage performance. I waited 20 minutes. Not to check where she was going. I already knew the pattern, but to ensure she was fully gone. Then I moved. The envelope was ready. The separation filing, asset protection notice, full legal packet. No note, no flourish. Just facts. I carried it upstairs to the bedroom. Her side of the bed was neatly made, untouched most nights now. I placed the envelope directly on her pillow. Visible. Unmistakable. There would be no missed signal. No way to claim she hadn't seen it. Afterward, I walked the house one more time. Secured the front door. Powered off and used lights. Returned to the living room with a book I wouldn't read. The clock ticked steadily past 10, then 11. Still no sign of her. A new routine. Staying out late enough to ensure I'd be asleep or checked out when she returned. She had no idea what waited upstairs. At 12:43 a.m., headlights swept across the living room wall. The door opened, heels clicked unevenly across the floor, tipsy, just as I expected. I stayed in my chair, posture relaxed. The envelope was already doing what it needed to do. I heard her ascend the stairs. A pause in the hallway. Then the bedroom door opened. Silence. No suitcase. No new clothes. Just her, and the envelope, waiting. Seconds stretched. Then the sharp rustle of paper. Pages sliding free. The sound of breath catching. Not immediate shouting. Not a staged confrontation. Just silence turning brittle. Then, hurried footsteps back down the stairs. She appeared in the doorway, envelope in hand, eyes wide, voice cracking beneath the surface. What is this?" she asked, though she already knew. I set my book down. My voice remained level. "You've read it." Her eyes darted over the first page again. "You can't be serious." I met her gaze. "It's already filed. The process has begun." She blinked rapidly. "We didn't even talk about this." I kept my tone calm. "You talked. I listened. The decision was made." Her fingers trembled against the edge of the envelope. "But I didn't think." She stopped, voice breaking. The tears started then, sharp, panicked. Not the tears of grief. The tears of losing control over the story. She crossed the room quickly. "Please, can we talk about this? You can't just, after everything." I didn't move. The time for talking was long ago. She tried again. "I was upset, you know that. I didn't mean all of it." I let silence fill the space. That was true in a way. She hadn't meant all of it. Only enough. Enough to erode what we once were. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, pacing in tight circles now. "We can fix this. We always fix it." Her voice cracked on the last word. Panic fully breaking through the rehearsed defiance. But there was nothing left to fix. I stood. Not to threaten, not to escalate, just to signal that the conversation was over. "You should get some rest," I said quietly. "You'll need clarity in the morning." She stared at me like a stranger. For the first time in months, she looked unsure, no longer scripting the scene. "I didn't think you'd actually do it," she whispered. I held her gaze. "That was your mistake." As I left the room, her sobs followed behind, raw now, not performative. I closed the door behind me, not to shut her out, but because there was nothing more to say. The papers spoke clearly enough. By dawn, the house was silent. I'd slept in the guest room. A deliberate choice, not avoidance, but closure. I wasn't staging a scene. I wasn't waiting to be confronted. I'd already stepped outside of the story she was still trying to direct. Around 6:30 a.m., I heard faint movement upstairs, floorboards creaking under uneven steps. When I entered the kitchen, she was already there. Hair tangled, face pale, eyes swollen from crying. The envelope rested on the island, papers fanned out beside an untouched cup of coffee. She looked up as I approached, mouth opening as if to speak, then closing again. No words came at first, just a long, uneven breath. Finally, "We don't have to do this," I answered calmly. "It's already done." Tears welled again. "You filed it?" I nodded once. "The attorney confirmed receipt last night." Her hands clenched at the edge of the counter. I was upset. People say things. "You blindsided me." I met her gaze evenly. "I didn't. You spoke your intentions long before last night." I listened. The truth of it landed harder than any accusation. I saw it in her expression, an unraveling, not from losing love, but from losing control. What followed wasn't a fight. It wasn't shouting or begging. It was collapse. She tried a dozen angles in minutes: rationalization, denial, soft apology, even veiled blame. I was under stress. "You've been so distant. We were supposed to fight for this. I didn't think you'd actually go through with it." I let the words hang without argument. Every response would be ammunition for a story she still hoped to tell. I gave her nothing. At one point, her voice dropped to a whisper. "You don't love me anymore." I didn't flinch. "I respected us." "You did not. That's where we are." The sobs returned, this time unchecked. Not the careful, measured tears she'd shown before. This was full collapse. The panic of realizing the bluff had failed, that the scaffolding she'd built was gone. She paced the kitchen in small, frantic circles. "What about everyone? What are we going to tell people?" I answered plainly. "The truth." That halted her. Not because the truth was damning, but because it couldn't be spun. She sank into a chair, face in her hands. The weight of it was hitting now, not just the separation, but the narrative slipping away. The man she told friends was weak and safe had already moved past her. The man she'd claimed couldn't act without her had already ended it. And the man she thought would fight or plead now stood silent, composed, resolute. Mid-morning, I gathered my things for the day. Keys, laptop, a folder of documents for my attorney. She sat unmoving at the table, papers still spread in front of her. As I reached the door, she looked up one last time. "Is there really nothing left to save?" My voice remained steady. "There's no trust left to rebuild." I stepped outside, leaving the collapse behind. No triumph, no regret. Just the clean clarity of an ending long overdue. Words spread faster than I expected. By the end of that first week, mutual friends began reaching out, some cautious, some openly surprised. Not at the separation itself, at who had initiated it. The first message came from one of her close friends. She told me things had been rough, but "I didn't know you'd already filed. Is this real?" I responded simply, "It's real." The decision was considered and final. No accusations. No details. The high ground mattered, not just legally, but for clarity. In the following days, the pattern repeated. Some messages came with sympathy veiled in suspicion, as if they'd expected a different story. A few came with quiet acknowledgement, like they'd seen through her narrative long ago. I answered each one the same way, calm, brief, factual. I wasn't writing a counter-narrative. I didn't need to. At home, the dynamic shifted visibly. She no longer staged her phone calls or texts. No more flirty messages left in plain sight. No more loud conversations about her options. Instead, closed doors, quiet tension, long stretches where she remained in her room, scrolling endlessly. The collapse was ongoing, internal now, no longer performative. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that the man she'd been orbiting had distanced himself. Not in confrontation, just silence. Ghosted. He wasn't interested in the fallout. He hadn't signed up to be part of this mess. When I heard that, there was no satisfaction, just inevitability. The divorce proceeded steadily. My attorney kept the process moving, filings submitted, court dates scheduled, protections enforced. She responded through counsel, tone subdued, no longer posturing. The confidence from weeks prior was gone. There were attempts to renegotiate, to draw the process out. Each was met with the same calm consistency. I didn't engage emotionally. I didn't argue. The structure held. Friends divided. Some who had bought her version of events seemed unsure how to process what had happened. The image of the passive, dependent husband no longer matched reality. Others, those who'd witnessed the slow erosion, reached out with quieter support. They knew. They'd seen it building. One message stood out. You held your dignity when it counted. Not many do. In the final weeks, as papers neared completion, the last conversations between us were purely logistical. Dates, signatures, property splits. No late-night confessions. No dramatic reconciliations. She tried once more, toward the end, to soften the process. A quiet, almost wistful remark. It didn't have to end this way. I answered without hesitation. But it did. Emotional scars remained. Of course they did. There was no neat closure. No sudden lightness. The weight of what had been endured lingered. But it was honest weight now, not denial, not self-deception. Freedom wasn't joy. It was clarity. Thank you for watching. Bye.